So after the government slashed the FAME 2 subsidy for EV makers, the fallout has been impacting consumers. The prices of EVs have been increased, and not only that, but it also comes in at a critical juncture as far as India's EV ecosystem is concerned. We had just only started taking off. There are still issues of adoption. So Mr. Gill, I have two questions for you here. Number one, you've also mentioned in the letter yesterday that you sent to Union Minister Piyush Goyal's office, you mentioned that there are dues pending to EV makers. But earlier itself, you had spoken to ET Now, wherein you had only yourself said that subsidies have to be tapered off after a while. What I want to understand from you today is the kind of impact the EV ecosystem and the various stakeholders are facing: consumers, employees, distributors, dealerships, etc. Could you take us through the kind of challenges they are facing and the overall EV ecosystem is facing as of now?
Like, this issue of tapered subsidy is subsequent to the major issue that the industry was facing of more than 1,600 crores stuck with the Ministry of Heavy Industry. So it's like a double whammy that has come. For if we separate the two issues in a standalone mode, we have to still see which way the tapered subsidies go as far as E2W or electric two-wheeler adoption goes. The initial, obviously, we have seen it is a 50 to 60% drop. Whether it gets recovered or not, we have to wait and see. But as it seems like it's still in infancy, it's been just three years of real subsidy support. Before that, it was hardly anything that was happening. And we have seen countries like China and many others which have done for more than 15 years, 10 to 15 years support, and then start withdrawing. That is a sustenance level that we believe. Today, we are at 4.9%. So let's not put years there, that 2 years more or 3 years more. Let's think of two things. One is what should be the sort of adoption percentage. Thereafter, it will take off on its own, and then the tapering can happen. And second is how much time it will take normally, and how would you support that? So my personal take is that anything below 25% adoption is a risky affair in a country like India, which are direct customer subsidies, because customer is right now buying a price at which he's buying a petrol bike. So if you take down or reduce or remove the subsidy, the price becomes 1.5 times or 2 times of a petrol bike price. So I don't think so. India, like Europe or any other country, it's a very different country. It's a very price sensitive country, affordable, value for money bikes. So as soon as the price goes outside 1.2 to 1.3 times of petrol bikes, the sales would drop drastically, till it gets sustained over a period of years in terms of running cost advantage and total cost of ownership advantage. Those have not yet set in at all, because hardly close to 2 million bikes are on the road, and half of them are off the road right now. So my personal take is it's too premature to withdraw the subsidy. On the other hand, yes, there is a money to in India to sustain the subsidies. These are the two things that are always discussed amongst us policy makers and sort of people who are in the know of things.
Very interesting that you mention of China here, the fact that more number of years are perhaps required before these subsidies are eventually tapered off. But I want to take you back to the point about the impact on the overall EV ecosystem. Can you share in further detail on the kind of impact this move is having on the EV ecosystem? Because just in your letter to Union Minister Piyush Goyal, you mentioned about vendor payments, employee insecurity, and collapsing dealerships. Do you want to elaborate on each of these points?
What we are telling all the ministries, including MHI and Commerce Ministry and Finance Ministry, is that the so-called the 5 or 10 people who started this e-mobility 10 years back, in fact, Hero started 15 years back, they are on the verge of collapse. And that is today very much seen in terms of network getting depleted, employees leaving, the labor unrests, and a lot of losses here and there happening. And people in this business of these 10 OEMs, they are staring in the dark at what's going to happen in the future for them. And many of them are perhaps on the verge of close-up. And that's because of just last 2 years happening of a delay in localization by some of them, and on account of that, a punitive or a very harsh action taken by MHI of totally withdrawing the subsidy or even recovering the subsidy that has been given, rendering them almost penniless in this process. That's why we are asking for 3,000 crores sort of a subsistence fund from Finance Ministry, so at least some of them can live through this crisis. Something like a grant or an interest-free loan guaranteed by the ministry so that people have some chance of recovery rather than trying to resolve this matter, which has become a chronic case now. And it's almost looks like that it's a deadlock.
So, Mr. Gill, you're mentioning 2-3 very crucial points here. You're mentioning interest-free loans, you're also mentioning grants. But can you further expand a bit on industry expectations of the government? And secondly, if this deadlock is not resolved, how do EV makers plan to stay afloat?
One has to understand the broader objective of the policy, which was to really go ahead in a big way in converting electric petrol two-wheelers to electric in a short time. That was a broader objective. Other things came as along because this policy announcement came 8 years back, and like localization started around 3 years back or so, right? So those are subsequent objectives. Now, if you keep localization as a prime objective and keep the other things at stake, this is what's happening. The industry has collapsed. People are going out of business. This is the result of sort of an upside down type of a priority of the ministry over here. So what I was thinking was that, okay, if the so-called legacy players, the Bajaj and TVS, etc., they also had some issues with the policy and graver issues of localization as well as over-invoicing. But there was a pragmatic and a practical view taken of trying to wriggle them out of this crisis situation by sort of not really pushing them hard, but incrementally paying back to the customers some 10% or 20% of what they were over invoicing, and off they go, and they have started coming back onto the business. The same way in localization, if there is a possibility that, okay, if your quality was not suffering, if everything was being sold as per the CMVR certification of quality standards, technology, and everything was right, just one fine moment, a vendor A could not be changed to vendor B is not a sin, it's not a crime. So take a pragmatic view of either proportionality of out of 100 parts, 3 parts could not be done. Okay, let's do something about those 3 parts. Or leave it for the time being if the quality and technology was super and the vehicles are performing well, which are they? They are performing for the last 5 years, 7 years. So no issues on that. So this type of a view, if it is sort of precipitated by some other sort of an action at the back, rather than trying to resolve, it results into this type of a crisis in the long term. And as of now, it seems, the answer seems to be that the way the legacy players were wriggled out of it, same way the rest of these 7, 8, 10 players who are almost on the verge of bankruptcy can be given a lifeline by taking a practical view. And okay, and it's a one-time problem of the past. Today, everybody is localized 100% because today the volumes are very high and there's a queue of localization suppliers. There's an issue of 2 years back. Forget it, put it in the past, go for broader objectives. Otherwise, you will create a big debacle in the country as far as electric mobility is concerned. And it'll have to restart again from a clean slate. And God knows what happens.
Okay, so when you are mentioning that 7 to 10 players are on the verge of bankruptcy, but what about the bigger players? How are they able to sustain this? And is there a particular segment on which the impact has been more pronounced?
Yeah, the premium segment has become the pricing, like 1.6 lakhs and above, 1.5 lakhs and above vehicles have got a clean pitch for running at a full speed because the others have vacated. The affordable bikes have vacated the market. All the earlier players, those so-called 7, 8 players, were trying to create value for money, affordable bikes at a value proposition near to the petrol bikes. So they are the ones who have got out of the market and their shares have dwindled down to less than 10%. That used to be 90%. And this share has been taken over by the premium bikes, which are right now costing 1.5 lakhs and above, and with a tapered subsidy 1.3, 1.4 lakhs and above. And that's why there's a sort of a complete distortion of the market towards premium products. But India is not a market for premium products, you know it. It's a market for commuter products. But commuter products have gone out of the market totally.